with the rhyme scheme A B A B C D C D E F E F G G. The poem has a pristine surface, and reading it, hearing it, you can grasp its theme with ease. True love's permanence in a world that's impermanent. It's the kind of poem you might hear somebody read at a wedding or quote in a movie.
It belongs to the marriage of true minds and impediments. Love is not love, which alters like alteration finds, ends with the remover to remove.
Sonnet 116 is carefully designed to give you the impression that you understand what it's saying. But look a little closer, and this sonnet proves to be much more slippery and strange than it initially seems. The sonnet begins with a somewhat curious line. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Admit. What does he mean by that word? It's unclear. It could mean that he'll protect a marriage of two minds from the impediments that seek to destroy it. It could mean that he refuses to acknowledge impediments. Or it could mean that he won't confess to impediments even if...
Color pencil art. Hello, color
the
pencil.
ambiguity is unsettling, and that feeling is immediately augmented by the second half of line 2. Love is not love, which is contradictory and really meaningless. Of course, this is only the beginning of a full sentence, but where a poet puts his line breaks is always significant. The second sentence begins a definition of love, which is the central aim of the poem, but it does this not by saying what love is, but what it's not. Love is not something that changes when it confronts changes, either in the lover or the world. It's not something that leaves, even when a lover does. But notice that I'm paraphrasing here, which is something that the sonnet is
Color pencil art.
to
First
do.
like,
I
first
just
view,
mentioned
first
the lovers
comment.
and the world.
Oh, that's
But these
nice. How
things
are you? I'm good.
conspicuously
Thank you for
absent
being
from
the
poem,
first
which is one of its
viewer.
oddest qualities. And sonnets are often written for someone, to someone, a beloved, but there is no one here, no one but the speaker. As Jane Roessler points out, the first quatrain is entirely, radically abstract. In the second quatrain, we move from negative to positive definitions, getting a little more concrete, but not much. Love is an ever-fixed mark and a star. The mark may be a sea mark, a beacon anchored in or near the water to aid navigation, like stars aid navigation to sailors in their ships, their wandering barks. A star may be a guide, but it's also distant and remote, unreachable. What good is this ideal of changeless love to real people who are destined to change, to wander, to fail, to grow? In the third quatrain, Shakespeare descends further, and we catch our first glimpse of a human being. Here, the rosy lips and cheeks of youth that fade in time. Except they don't fade. They're caught in time's bending sickle. How else do we know who carries one of those? It's a somewhat gruesome image that's a little too easy to picture. But no matter, love is not time's fool. Love doesn't change. Love bears it out. To where? The edge of doom. For a poem that promised not to admit impediments, it seems like we're running into them at every turn. In fact, Sonnet 116 is invaded by negatives, like weeds sprouting in a flower bed. Finally, the couplet, another point made in the negative. If he's wrong about love, well, then he's never written a word and no one has ever loved. But since people clearly have loved, and since we've just been reading words he's written, we're supposed to conclude that he can't be wrong. But it's a paradoxical way to put it, because if he is in error, a possibility he seems to acknowledge, well, that would negate the very ideal of love itself, taking the poem along with it into oblivion. In Sonnet 116, Shakespeare constantly undermines the easy assumptions we make about it. We're not hearing a love poem for someone. We're not even hearing a poem about the supposed permanence of love. We're hearing a speaker in a void, trying to convince himself that love is somehow different than every other thing in the ephemeral universe, and not succeeding. You get the sense of someone closing their eyes the sonnet despite itself, that love is as erratic and fluid and volatile as the people who feel it. This doesn't mean that true love, the marriage of true minds, is any less real or any less beautiful. It's the opposite, in fact, something Shakespeare knew very well. Beauty belongs to what's hidden, and we cherish the most the things we can lose. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. This
Art
episode
Girls,
was sponsored
best.
by
Thank you,
the
thank you.
Remarkable 2 tablet. Now, I was super excited about this sponsorship because I've been seeing this product everywhere and it looked perfect for me. Now that I've actually got one, I'm happy to say that it is really great. Primarily because it solves a problem.
I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. I am never without it. Anywhere I go, you go, my dear. And whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling. I fear no fate, for you are my fate, my sweet. I want no world, for beautiful you are my world, my true. And it's you are whatever a moon has always meant, and whatever a sun will always sing is you. Here is the deepest secret nobody knows. Here is the root of the root, and the bud of the bud, and the sky of the sky, the tree called life, which grows higher than soul can hope.
Hello, living the dream. I'm good, thank you. Everything is fine. It's been raining and I love it.
The stars apart. I carry your heart. I carry it in my heart.
Of all the many highly experimental poems by E.E. Cummings, I Carry Your Heart With Me, I Carry It In, is among the most straightforward and approachable. It's the one you're most likely to hear at weddings, or at weddings in rom-coms.
I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart.
And because this poem seems effortless, it feels pulled out of time, too. I think that was what Cummings wanted, to make this poem universal, a quintessential love poem for the modern age. I mean, just take a look at the 5 concrete images that he uses. Hearts, moon, sun, tree, stars. It's hard to imagine 5 symbols more archetypal. So the intention here is clearly
Finally, some
universal
rain, good
appeal.
for the plants.
But
That's
not a
true.
slight on the poem's construction
And
or
good.
its meaning, just the opposite, in fact. As Yeats
And
once
also,
brilliantly wrote about his own craft, a line will take us hours,
Mas lumamig.
yet it does not seem a moment's
Nawala
thought
na yung parang
or stitching and
impyernong
unstitching
init.
has been gnawed. So first, let's take a look at the formal construction of I Carry Your Heart. The first thing to notice is that the poem is split into 2 overlapping parts. Everything that's outside the parentheses and everything that's inside them. This follows the theme set up in the first line, the theme of the narrator's lover being contained within his heart, and vice versa. This reciprocal relationship is hammered home in the first stanza with anywhere I go, you go, and whatever is done by only me is your doing. Every statement in this poem is followed by a parenthetical statement, and frequently keywords used outside of them are found inside as well, linking the 2 parts and the 2 people. Parentheses are the perfect punctuation to use because visually they actually represent the image of containment. As critic Roy Tartakovsky has observed, Cummings finds several poetic functions from the parentheses throughout his work, whether it's to convey intimacy or protection, or to give a direct address to the subject, or, like we just discussed, to use its crescent shape as an icon in itself. Indeed, as Tartakovsky notes, parentheses have a somewhat contradictory place in all art writing. Formally, they're supposed to contain throwaway information, stuff that would theoretically be perfectly okay to leave out. But because of this, because they don't have to be there and yet still are, parenthetical comments call attention to themselves, foregrounding their contents while backgrounding them at the same time. Ambiguity like that is exactly what Cummings loves to play with, and it reinforces the poem's themes. Clearly, Cummings is using the parentheticals for intimacy. You can see that in his additions of my dear, my darling, my sweet, my true, but he also uses them to develop his philosophy of self and love. See, for Cummings, love is a condition in which two fragmented selves come together to form a more perfect unity. And if there's one great theme in his collected work, it's the importance of being a truly transcendentally alive individual against the dulling and alienating forces of modern progress. But the individual self was always a problematic idea for Cummings, whereas sometimes he avowed that man is a miraculously whole human being. Elsewhere, like in the same sentence, he says that man's only happiness is to transcend himself. Again and again, his
Jokes about
poetry
this
affirms
wicked
that
hit were
transcendence
like close
comes with
battalion to
losing
the
the self in love, whether it's said gracefully outright, like when he writes, losing
Kuya
through you
E,
what
sir, ano
seemed
pong
myself,
maisasuggest nyo na
I find selves
budget-friendly color pencil for
unimaginable.
realistic drawing? Muli, color
Or
pen
it's
lang po.
demonstrated in some
Tos ko
formal
eh.
fireworks, like in this poem, where the you and me is literally
Budget-friendly
fused together,
yung
and
ano,
the
Faber
speaker has
Castell
difficulty
Classic,
determining what
Crayola,
form
o
the
kaya
verb
yung
is
Blood
best to use.
Funer.
Love's ability to transcend is the focus of I Carry Your Heart, and Cummings is using whatever he can to explore different connotations of transcendence. Just take a look at the third stanza. Love is literally a cosmic force that holds the stars in the firmament, but it's also the deepest secret, and Cummings suggests this deepness by nesting the secret in parentheses, which are themselves nested into the poem, and the secret is buried further in the root of the root, in the bud of the bud. And the symbols I mentioned earlier, sun and particularly moon, are symbols of transcendence throughout his poetry. I mean, what has the moon always meant to Cummings? In a great essay by Cummings critic Martin Husser, which I'll link to below, the moon's significance is traced across several poems. It's variously described as a remarkable splinter, dainty mademoiselle, watch spring, the moon, big red dog, mystery, as having small hands, and as the shyest metaphor. Cummings has a transcendental reverence for the moon, but he has a hard time pinning it down in language. That's why it's the shyest metaphor. Any attempt to understand it, to know it, will result in the symbol fleeing further away. This is what the moon has always meant to Cummings, and it's the way he feels about love in poetry, too. In his notes, which are collected at Harvard, he once wrote, "To know is to possess, and any fact is possessed by everyone who knows it, whereas those who feel the truth are possessed, not possessors." Like the great American transcendentalist, Cummings believes truth, poetry, and love cannot be comprehended, only experienced. With his poetry and all its intense experimentation, he attempts to short-circuit our impulse toward knowing so that we might experience language anew. I Carry Your Heart is a rare attempt at clarity. In form and content, it points toward love, just as it points toward Cummings' philosophy. But its true magic is in the way it unfolds effortlessly, in a rhythm and cadence harmonious with feeling. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. I want to point you guys in the direction of a channel that I really love, Wisecrack. We've been pushing back and forth to each other because I think if you like my stuff, you're definitely going to love what they do. They do 8-bit philosophy, thug notes. I've really been loving Earthling cinema, which is like film analysis from the perspective of a crabby but
Living the Dream Soul Drawaholics drawing of this Wolverine went straight to color pencil, like he has an invisible trace on the pad or something. Is really good. Yours is good too. Yeah, I think he is also using a tracing method, I think.
With big, difficult terms and full of rhetorical devices that are intentional in practice. The speech, as everyone knows, was delivered at the March on Washington in 1963 and voiced the economic, political, and moral message of civil rights to 250,000 people in front of the Lincoln Memorial. On to those people and the billions who have seen or heard it since, King's words imprinted an image of what Black Americans were fighting for and why, fully 100 years after Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation.
50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation.
The very first line of the speech is already doing so much. The first 4 words are an allusion to Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, an instantly recognizable piece of American rhetoric that, in one fell swoop, links America's founding, which Lincoln spoke of, and the Civil War, when he spoke, with the fight for civil rights. Throughout the speech, King takes great pains to make links like this. It's important for him to frame civil rights as a chapter in the larger American mythology, so that those who identify with that mythology might incorporate this struggle into that story.
The unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
But there's even more to see in this first line. One of the things that makes King's words so memorable is their musicality. Here he uses alliteration, 5 words starting with the letter S, that draw you along the sentence. Like a tune that's catchy, the alliteration helps a phrase stick in the mind, and King returns to it again and again in this speech.
Dark and desolate valley, this sweltering summit of the Negro's legitimate discontent. The marvelous new militants out of great trials and tribulations, dignity and discipline. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check.
This isn't the only rhythmically aware or musical feature of I Have a Dream. There's another rhetorical device called anaphora, which King uses even more than alliteration. Anaphora is the repetition of a word or phrase at the beginning of successive sentences, something that in writing would be redundant, but in speech is an effective tool for emphasis. In I Have a Dream, Martin Luther King uses anaphora as an emphasizing tool, but also as an organizing device. Listen to how these phrases sketch the larger ideas of the speech, almost like an outline.
But 100 years later, 100 years later, 100 years later, 100 years later, but we refuse to believe, we refuse to believe. Now is the time, now is the time, now is the time, now is the time. We can never be satisfied, we can never be satisfied, we cannot be satisfied, we can never be satisfied. I have a dream, I have a dream, I have a dream, I have a dream, I have a dream today. Let freedom ring, let freedom ring, let freedom ring, let freedom ring, let freedom ring.
The speech goes from the past to the present to the future of civil rights, and is threaded with a refusal to settle for anything other than the ideal of freedom and equality. I think this is a key to Martin Luther King's rhetorical genius. Drawing from his gospel roots, he not only uses alliteration and anaphora, even allusion, for dramatic effect, but also to help the audience grasp the structure and remember the nuance of his message. King knows that, for example, you may not know this line from Shakespeare.
Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this sun of York.
But the phrase will ring familiar.
This sweltering summit of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until that is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality.
King shifts the seasons, of course, because for those who live in the American South, autumn is more relieving than summer. You know your audience. And sticking with this paragraph for just a moment, notice that this sentence of Shakespearean poetry is couched in a point about urgency and not settling. And King isn't all flowery.
Limited can't wait for this movie. I bet Ryan and Hugh had fun shooting the film as they were best friends in real life. Oh, really?
That the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content, will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual.
I'm gonna watch it
Mixing
the
up
first
plain
day.
and ornate language is, I think, a microcosm of what occurs in the entire speech. After alluding to the Gettysburg
Gustavo
Address and the
Cruz,
Declaration of
thank you.
Independence, King compares the promises of those documents to a bad
Hello,
ship.
our art and craft tonight.
Insufficient funds.
After invoking the plain realities of police brutality, for whites only signs, and voter suppression, he paraphrases the Bible.
We will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
And the first half of the speech describes, in large part, the issue at hand, what is to be done and demanded, what is to be avoided. And he tells those who have suffered to hold fast and believe, while the final part, which was famously improvised by King on the spot, rises into the heights of dreams and ideals.
I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. Every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together.
In my video analyzing Donald Trump's speech, I talked about how he was able to connect with people by using simple language. It's a good general rule for public speaking when you're addressing a
Living the
large,
dream,
diverse
yeah,
audience.
big
The most
screen is the
important
way to
part
go
of
to say
rhetoric
this
is
film.
being understood.
That's
Trump does this by keeping his
very
words
true.
basic and emotional, and it works. But I think Martin Luther King offers a counterexample of public speaking, one that's more complex and layered in language and structure, but still just as easily understandable as anything that current politicians or speakers say. In I Have a Dream, the simple language contextualizes and grounds the poetic, and the poetic elevates and animates the simple. That's why it echoes across time, and will echo for decades and ages to come. Something vital and alive.
We will be able to speed up that day when all of us children, black